Hey guys, welcome to the Editing Bard, the channel that brings you writing tips that make sense. Today, I am super happy to have one of my former students through New Degree Press with me talking about her book and going to be doing the author interview, asking her some questions. And if you guys have any questions for her about her book as we kind of dive into things, please make sure to post it over in the chat that you'll see over on this side of the screen. And I will be monitoring the chat so we can pull those up and answer your questions. So I am going to send it over to Jennifer to do her introduction and her book.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for having me. I'm Jennifer Garman, and I am the author of Flourish, 7 Ways Gratitude Can Transform Your Life, which published last month, April 2020. And I was a student of Stephen's. He was my developmental editor, and I can honestly say without him, would never have gotten to this point. So I really appreciate all that he's done for me and all the help he's given me to get to this point.
I appreciate that. It was a lot of fun working with you on your book. And for everybody watching, we are having a bit of a time delay. So if you see me staring at the screen or Jennifer staring at the screen, it's just because internet is wonky today, probably because half the world's population is using the internet now more so than usual. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to work with you on your book, and it had a different feel to it. I haven't seen the finished product, and I'm sure that there's a lot that changed over the course of the process after you moved on in the program. But for those who are watching, what was kind of the catalyst that inspired you to sit down and actually write this book?
Well, it kind of goes back several years, actually about 10 years. I was sick with a mystery illness for the better part of a decade. So just over 7 years, I suffered from just constant fatigue, insomnia, a multitude of other symptoms, but those were the 2 major ones. And I went to doctor after doctor. I wasn't really getting any resolution on different protocols I was put on or different buckets that I was diagnosed into. I wasn't really seeing much of a difference in my health, in my symptoms. And I just kind of, at one point, and I just decided to go on with my life and stop going further down the rabbit hole, so to speak. So it was at that point that I just decided to get my coaching degree as a life coach and get certified. And during my studies to do that, I kept coming, the notion of gratitude kept coming up over and over again. And it was at that point where I'm like, there's got to be a reason for this, that, everything I would read, say the happiest people have gratitude as a pillar in their life. And I'm like, well, I might as well put it in mine. So I decided to implement it along with neuroplasticity techniques that I was also studying. And it was at that point where I started to see my health kind of turn the corner and get better. And then I decided to concentrate as opposed to my happiness on my health. And I in essence, I healed myself with the practice of gratitude, kind of intertwined with neuroplasticity. And that's what my book is all about. And I decided I needed to write this book because I thought there had to be other people out there that needed to hear what I went through to be able to help them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I remember when the subject of neuroplasticity came up, I was all about that because I've spent the better part of coming up on 5 years kind of learning about neuroplasticity and how it really makes a huge difference in someone's life and in someone's way of thinking. For those who don't know what neuroplasticity is, it's going to sound kind of like this pseudoscience, but it's actually very firmly rooted in science. So can you tell us a little bit about what neuroplasticity is and kind of how it relates to this idea of gratitude?
Yeah, neuroplasticity in its basic form means the brain's ability to change itself. And it's very scientifically studied and proven that people that practice the neuroplasticity techniques can basically transform. There's people that are now being studied that are quadra and paraplegics that are actually regaining movement in their limbs from neuroplasticity techniques, and basically making different neural pathways in their brain to make up for what was missing before. So it's incredibly phenomenal topic that I love to talk about. And I could probably sit here all day and talk about all the things that have come up and all the studies and what people have been able to do with their lives and their health through neuroplasticity techniques. But just kind of to break it down to its core, it just means the brain's ability to rewire and change itself.
Yeah. And that really is what it is at its very, very basic form. And it's a fascinating concept that I wasn't aware of until, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And so I was actually really excited when I saw it come up as a topic in your book, because it's not just like, well, just have this mentality of gratitude, just be happy, just do it. It's not like the Nike slogan. It's like, change the way that you think, and in changing the way that you think, you can actually start seeing things progress differently than they would have, because you're not just trying harder, you're actually doing something about it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think Joe Dispenza actually kind of wraps it up really well with his equation, where he says that if you take a strong intent and you bring in an elevated emotion with that, then you get the desired outcome. And that's his equation. And I think that that's brilliant, because that's what I did in essence. And I didn't even read his work when I did it, but I was like, yep, I'm another success that he's proven with his equation. So it's absolutely something that works, and it's amazing. And the ability to transform.
Do we still have you?
Oh, sorry, Stephen, you broke up for a second there.
All right, no worries. So when you were sitting down and getting the book kind of formulated and building it out, what were some of the challenges that you faced just kind of over the course of that process?
So I kind of broke it down initially into little chunks. I would do research, and my scientific studies would be one chunk. And then I was also gathering stories of other people who had had a similar transformation, so to speak, with gratitude intertwined. And I was gathering stories and interviews along with the research. So it was kind of just accumulating as, all these things I was gathering. I didn't have a path prior to that, as opposed to, chapters and outline. I was just gathering material that would hopefully one day be part of the book. And it worked out really well doing it that way.
Yeah. And what were some of the kind of amazing things that you discovered through the research that ended up in the book?
Honestly, there's so many. I'll pick one. The power of our thoughts was probably the most amazing thing to me. Just the science and the power behind our thoughts, and what we can do to affect ourselves in a negative way and a positive way. And because our thoughts do both. They can either on a cellular level affect us in a very positive way if we keep positive thoughts in our forefront, or if we have negative thoughts and emotions, they can affect us on a cellular way that way. And that was incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah, I can imagine the fact that Because we wrestle with negativity all around us, especially kind of during the time that we're in now. There's so much negative that's going on out there, and the timing of this book is really amazing because we look at the sheer amount of negativity that is currently going on in the world, and there is this kind of call to action with your book of like, we can still be grateful for what we have in the midst of all of this madness that is going on.
Yep. And you basically just broke it down to the core there. That's kind of what you have to do, is just in every circumstance, you just have to pull out something positive. And even in the worst of circumstances, one thing that people ask is like, what if everything is just going bad? Everything. I can't think of a positive thing. And I say, a lot of people, other people do this too. Just bring it back to your breath and your beating heart. Everybody that's alive right now can say that they're breathing and their heart is beating. And if you can just concentrate on those two things at a minimum, you can kind of build on it from there. And it's a starting point.
Yeah, that's really great, because a lot of times, we have those external pressures going on, and there really isn't a lot of positive that is happening externally. And so looking to like the fact that you're still alive and breathing and your heart is beating, and finding the positivity in that can be the very first step into kind of making that mental shift.
Absolutely.
And then I'm still waiting for it to pop up over here in the comments box, but Sage says, oh, there it goes. Every time I do it, Sage says, hey, Stephen, hey, Jennifer. If you guys have any questions, make sure to post them over in the chat box. I am monitoring it, even if there is a delay in getting into StreamYard. Hey, Ellie Cat. Welcome to the stream. So when you were going through and writing and doing all of the editing and revisions and all that kind of stuff, because you and I went through several iterations of things, what was to you like the most challenging aspect of actually getting this book written?
That's a great question. I'm going to bring this back to one word called flow. It's something I didn't know even existed until I started writing. And it's one of the most awesome things that I've ever had happen to me too. And I can honestly say that I could kind of set the stage for that to happen after a couple months of trying to figure things out, because probably the most challenging thing for me is like, okay, I have a half hour, I have 45 minutes, or maybe I even have an hour. I've got 3 kids. So an hour of time is just precious and very few and far between for me. So even when I would have little chunks of time, I would try and sit down and write, but I would just get blocked, and I just didn't know what to do with that. And it would frustrate me because I'm like, all right, I have this time, I need to make use of it, but nothing was coming, nothing was sounding right. The words weren't flowing. I was making all kinds of mistakes. But then I started to kind of piece together, okay, when do I have the most success with writing? And I kind of narrowed it down to the point where I'm like, all right, I need absolutely no one else around. I need basically the rest of my family asleep. So I'm not a night person. So I realized that has to be early in the morning. And I figured out if I would wake between 5 and 6 a.m. on a day where I wanted to get some writing done, I could get in about an hour, maybe a little more if I was lucky, of just time. And then when I didn't have any distractions and I knew it was just me alone, I would easily get into flow and I would just knock out page after page. And it was awesome because I didn't know that existed up until that point. And then I found out what it was and I'm like, wow, it does exist. It's incredible. So that was probably my most challenging thing and my most exciting thing of writing both together.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. Flow and a writing rhythm is so essential to creating that writing process that you're able to kind of follow. And the examples that I've been using with some of my students now is that when you find that, instead of having to like turn on the engine of creativity every single time, you kind of, it just kind of sits in idle until the next time that you're up and ready to be creative.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then Sage says, my husband is in the hospital right now and I'm worried and scared, but I'm also grateful that his doctors are on top of things. And that is such a great perspective to have, is that even in the midst of our fear, because we want to acknowledge that that thing exists, we can still be grateful for, those little things of like, these doctors are taking care of him. And, that's a great perspective to have.
I agree. That's incredibly mature to be able to have that perspective in a time of adversity like that, Sage. That's great.
Yeah. So the next thing that kind of comes to mind is that, you started off this process and it changed your health, and you became a life coach. You were learning, you're doing all of this research, putting it down into a book on top of everything else that you had going on. Cause I remember you were doing a lot when you were writing this. So what was that process of, like, you submitted the book to the publisher and you kind of entered into that next stage? What was that next stage like for you?
That was the hardest stage, to be honest with you, because there was a lot less of the creativeness and a lot more of the, I would say, drudgery a little bit. When you write a nonfiction book, I cannot stress enough that you have to think of your citations when you are writing the initial parts of your book. And that is something I did not do. So going back and finding all those things, and in some cases, very frustratingly, not being able to find the things that I knew I had found at one point, was really hard. Hours and hours and hours I could have saved if I just would have done that along the way, in the early stages of the writing process. So I wish I would have. I just want to encourage anybody who's writing nonfiction to make sure you just note your citations and your sources along the way as you're writing, because it's invaluable later down the road when you have to cite everything in your appendix.
Yeah, that's great advice, because I don't think that's something that, because nonfiction is not what I write. I write fiction, fantasy. And so, it doesn't even occur to me to save or make citation notes when I'm doing my writing on stuff. And that makes sense that if you're going to be citing all of these different things to back up your research, because you really have an incredible amount of research in your book, to back up and support what it is that you're talking about, that yeah, it's important to have that stuff in there.
Yes. Very, very important. And it's probably was the most frustrating part of writing, to be honest with you, because it's literally just drudgery. I mean, you're just going and you're making sure that, last name, comma, first name, comma, where it's from, year, date of the publication, all this stuff. And if I would have known to, make sure that as I was going to make those notes, it would have been a piece of cake. It would have taken me, a minute per citation versus, in some cases, hours per. And I had many, many citations in my book.
Yeah, because I remember when I was doing the developmental edit on it and looking over everything, like I said, you had a ton of research that we were working through to get it all to fit right in the right components and in the right flow of everything. And yeah, you did have a considerable amount of citations in there. So I can imagine that it was drudgery to try and get all of those again.
I blocked it out of my head at this point.
Just like it didn't happen. It's gone.
Focus on the positive.
Yeah, exactly. Grateful for all the extra time I had to work on those citations.
I'm grateful the citations are over with. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're going through and because I know that you were doing the fundraising, because that's kind of how NDP does it. They do Indiegogo campaign, all that kind of stuff. You fundraised enough to get your ebook and your paperback out, and that is up on Amazon. It is what's the word that I was looking for?
Yes.
Having a senior moment now. Lost my train of thought. What was the most interesting aspect of gratitude that you found? Because like obviously there's like the science and the neuroplasticity that comes with gratitude, the thought patterns and being positive about that. What about gratitude is so powerful versus than just like, well, focusing on being happy or focusing on joy or, just kind of doing my own thing and just kind of letting it ride? What is it about gratitude that makes it so much more powerful?
Well, that's a great question, because what they've done scientifically is they have studied all of the emotions and their vibrational frequency. And as it would be, gratitude has the highest vibrational frequency. So if you think of everything in terms of energy, anxiety and stress and depression are all very low frequencies. And if you equate a low frequency with just kind of the state you're feeling in all of those instances, you're just feeling down and weighed down. It's because the frequency is and the energy is very low and it's very draining, versus emotions like love, joy, and at the very top, gratitude, have all very high wave frequencies. So the energy level is just a complete 180 from the others. And it's why you feel so good when you're experiencing those emotions, is because the energy and the wavelength is so high in the frequencies that you can bring your entire state of being up that level by feeling those emotions. And that's something that was so eye-opening to me, because I always knew that, joy and love and gratitude were, feel-good emotions, but I didn't understand the science behind it until I started writing this book. And it was just eye-opening to realize that scientifically there was a reason for it.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because when you feel those things, you are more upbeat, you are more, you have more energy, you want to be doing more of those types of things. I had never realized that it could be attached to a frequency.
Everything is energy. And that's another thing I learned. Everything is energy. And if you go down to a quantum physics level, it's a complete shift in 180 from Newtonian physics as we know it. Like, this table is solid. Well, not in quantum physics, it's not. It's probable that the table is there and it's solid, but it's not a given. Everything's probability and everything is energy in quantum physics. And that's, again, a very eye-opening thing that I learned.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things that I loved about working on your book, because I know that you and I had the conversation at least a couple of times, but when we were going through there, it was eye-opening to me, and it kind of helped me redefine my outlook on gratitude and what I was actually grateful for. And the fact that it is your book isn't just to make people feel good, it's actually to give them the tools to actually experience a life change. It's not just like, the 5 easy steps of, finding joy. And it's all very kind of superficial stuff. It's like, again, I know I'm repeating this, but yours is very much rooted in the science of it. I don't know of a single self-help book or a book that talks about, finding joy or having gratitude that goes into quantum physics to explain it.
Yeah, I had no idea I was going to end up with a quantum physics degree either.
I mean, it's so cool that, you started down a track of like, wow, this has impacted my life. This has made a difference. And then you dove into that to really figure out the why behind it. And then it literally brings you down to quantum physics. And, and it's just like, what?
Well, from an explanatory perspective, it is quantum physics because it's energy and vibration, but it really is not something that anyone needs to know or worry about. It's just kind of the scientific backing of why it's so powerful kind of goes into that realm. But it's not anything anybody has to. The word quantum physics to most people are like, stay away. I don't want to know. And you don't really have to know that. I just wanted to throw some of that in there to show that I wasn't just making this up. There were a lot of people that studied it and showed that the proof is in the pudding, basically, that this is really as powerful as I'm saying it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's because I mean, your book is a very easy read. I mean, even when we were going through it, you make everything very clear as to what it is that you're talking about. And you explain it in a way that people can understand. Because, like, I don't understand quantum physics. It baffles my mind. It's fascinating to me, but it's baffling, and I think it baffles a lot of people as well. To think that like the table or the desk or the chair that I'm sitting in is probable, but it may not actually exist. It's just energy. It's just like, poof. But you explain it in a way that is very straightforward, very easy to understand, very easy to digest, and it makes it the reader is going to be able to grasp the concepts of what it is that you're talking about and be able to apply it, which is one of the things that I loved about your book. Even before it was published, just working on it, even back then, I could understand exactly what it was that you were saying.
Well, thank you for saying that. That was my hope, that I could get it across in a way that was applicable to anyone to understand. And to be honest with you, I don't understand quantum physics either. I think most people that study it probably don't fully understand it, because it is all probability and energy, and that, all matter out there is literally 0.01% mass, and the rest is just space. And it's just like, whoa, how does anybody grasp that, right? And when we're sitting here with all this physical stuff around us, like, how does any of that make sense? But somehow it does.
Yeah. And it's just like, you know what? I'm grateful that it does.
Just have gratitude when in doubt.
Yeah. When in doubt, just go the gratitude route.
It will definitely do you good.
Yeah. So we're edging up on that 30-minute mark, which is, for those of you who have seen some of my past author interviews, is typically when I take a moment to make sure to say, go support Jennifer down in the show notes, and you'll see the little ticker going across the bottom. I've linked to her book. You can find it on Amazon. It's ebook and paperback. At the very least, go check it out and see if it's going to be something that would be of interest to you. I have a feeling it will be. And let me say that in this time that we are in, it is really unprecedented. And we have people who are needing some hope. And this provides them an outlet to, or not an outlet. It provides them insight on how that they could change how they perceive everything that is happening and still remain grateful in the midst of all the hardship. Because we have people who are losing loved ones. They're losing jobs. Some lose their homes. Like if there was any time for us to just kind of throw in the towel, now would kind of be the time. But that doesn't have to be the case. And if you're in a good place, great. Get this book and read it for that person out there that you know who may be struggling. Because one of the things that I took away from this when I was doing the developmental edit with Jennifer at the very beginning of this book was I learned how to be more grateful for my life circumstances. And if you guys have seen my testimonial video, I've been through a considerable amount. And Jennifer's book actually helped me in that initial concept to find and be grateful for those things and still be able to move on and process them in all the good ways. And so I can now take that knowledge and give it back to someone else. So I highly recommend that you guys check out her book. If not for yourself, do it for those people around you who are going to need some encouragement. They're going to need someone to be grateful and to help energize them and pull them out of the funk that everything going on in the world today is kind of throwing everyone into. So, Jennifer, did you have anything to add about your book?
I just wanted to add that my one of the chapters in my book is all about handling adversity, and there's some stories in there of people that have just been through. Well, all throughout my book is people that have just been through some unimaginable scenarios in their life and have gotten through it and come out on the other side in not only a grateful mindset, but with happiness and with joy. And when you look and you see what some of these people have gone through, and to be able to get back to that point is, in my mind, almost miraculous. But after studying gratitude and understanding, what it's done in my life, it's completely fathomable to me now, but to a lot of people would not be. And it's more inspirational than anything. When you read these people's stories, then you find out that, one of them, that he went to prison. He was a professional athlete and just made a mistake and ended up going to prison. And, several years of his life was lost, and it was in the peak of, his prime years. And for one little, mistake that he made, and he was able to, reverse that around and make the most of it and actually prosper in that time and come out with, just this incredible gratitude and incredible joy for life from his circumstances. And that story's in there. And it's just, it was so inspiring to me to share that story, and others that are in there as well. So I just hope that it's also uplifting to people to read these stories and to realize they're not the only ones in, circumstances that are dire or that feel, like there's no way out. There's other people that have been through it and they've come out on the other side in a really good way. So there's a lot of hope.
Yeah, no, and that's such a good reminder too, because not only do you pull a little bit from your own life story in this, you actually have many stories, and you had a lot of in-person interviews, or at least over the phone interviews with these people. And I mean, you've talked to a considerable amount of people to get research for this book, and many of their stories are in there. And I know that the athlete is one of your favorite stories that went in to the book. I believe it's one of the ones that is hinted at on the Amazon page, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right.
But what are some of the other ones that, without giving too much away, obviously, because, hashtag spoilers, you guys gotta go buy the book if you want to know all the people. But what are some of the other ones that really kind of that you connected with and were like, wow, that's just amazing?
Too many to count, but another one that really struck me was I interviewed, he's now CEO of a company, a very successful company, about a decade or so ago, lost everything when the real estate bubble popped. And I mean, he went bankrupt. He lost everything. And he had built up quite a mass of fortune for himself and his family. And he had just overinvested and just, within, a month's time was down, filing bankruptcy, moving out of their home, selling every possession they had. And just, literally a riches to rags story. But when he kind of regrouped mentally and set his perspective to, wait a minute, I still have my family. I still have so much to be grateful for. It's at that point when he was able to start rebuilding his life. And now he's at a point where he has made his mission to teach gratitude to other people, to kind of facilitate joy and happiness around the world. And, he's now CEO of a company yet again, and he still takes several hours a day to go and to talk to other people about gratitude and about teaching them to be able to teach other people and empower others to make considerable changes in their life through gratitude.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that, when your life is, and I think this is the beauty of gratitude and what you were talking about, where, the frequencies and it energizes us when we're in like that, when we ourselves are able to find gratitude in our own life, and we experience the beauty, no matter what our circumstances is, we're unable to hold it in. Like, we have to share it with somebody else. Like, we're almost compelled to do it, because I mean, if it helps you, why wouldn't it help somebody else? And reaching out to those people and being like, hey, like, I totally get it, but we can be thankful for what we have together. And I think that's a great way to build community too, is to have that group of people who are always loving and encouraging you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to add on that, one thing that it's actually a technique that I teach as a coach, is an exercise called finding the beauty. And a great way to go experience that is just to go outdoors, be in nature, and just experience around you just the awe and the complexity of everything that is happening in, the animal life and the plant life, in the weather, and just basically be in awe and gratitude of that and feel that. And just, especially if you're having a bad day, you'll be surprised how much that turns your mood around and your day around even.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting out, even just sitting out on your, go to a park and just close your eyes and like listen to the birds and just enjoy. It's hard to do, especially like if you're in Portland, Oregon, because it just rains 9 out of the 12 months of the year. And so you gotta really hit it on the right day. But just sitting out and being grateful. I've done that. We have a little hammock. We're out in Eastern Oregon now, and we have a little hammock tied up between the trees. We have mountains in, the background, and I'll just sit out there and it's just quiet. I hear the crickets, and I just thank God that I can have that place of where I can just have a moment of peace, where I'm not trying to worry about a YouTube video. I'm not worrying about editing, not worrying about my own story. I just take that time, just go and just to sit and just be, just to simply exist and just to bask in the beauty of nature. Like, it's such a refilling thing.
Yeah. And you hit on another really important point, and that's being present. When you're not looking forward, what's going to happen, versus looking back as like, oh no, this happened, what am I going to do? If you're just fully present, it's really hard to be anxious or depressed, because they say that anxiety is in the future and depression is in the past. So if you're truly in the present, then you're not being in an anxious mind or a depressed mind. And that's just a really powerful place to be.
Yeah, that's a really interesting mindset. I hadn't thought of that before, where because like if we think of anxiety and worry, it typically revolves around something that has not yet come to pass. And then it's very rarely over something that has happened actually in the past. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way before.
Okay, sorry. We were just catching up. So I think we're all caught up now.
No worries. So moving forward, with your book, with it being published, what are some things that you're doing right now to kind of get your name out there, help people find the book? What does that look like so far? How's the response to the book been?
It's been very humbling and exciting at the same time. I had no idea that it would do as well as it's done. I'm incredibly grateful for that and so humbled. I truly believe that this was a calling from God to write this book to help other people. And that's what I said, like, I'm going to go do this because if I can even help one person, it's all worth it. And I've gotten responses from people I don't know that have said that, my book has changed their life. And that's been just like, my heart is so full and so grateful just hearing that from one person. So it's been amazing. And as far as next steps go, I'm hopefully going to be recording the audiobook this summer and releasing that. My hope is sometime around the late summer, early fall timeframe. And just doing a lot of interviews and podcasts and virtual stuff right now, and I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that can turn into in-person stuff shortly.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. So, and like when you've done the podcasts and the radio interviews, what kind of response has that gotten you? Just in terms, not even necessarily in sales, but just from people just hearing your story.
Well, honestly, this is the first live event that I've done. So everything else I've done up until this point has been recorded for future release. So I would say about 2/3 of what I've already recorded has not yet been released. The third that has been released has been just really exciting. I've actually gotten some emails and some responses from people that have let me know that they're so excited and so happy for me for my book. Again, people I don't know, which is just like, blows my mind, but it's been exciting. I just like every day is a new exciting day that I wake up to experience. I'm so grateful.
That's awesome. And I think that's like the hopes and dreams of every author out there ever. At least the ones that actually care about the readers and their books, where they just, to hear that that their book made a difference in someone's life and had an impact and, is going to leave some sort of legacy. Whoop. Uh-oh. All right, there we go. And that's going to leave some sort of legacy for people, I think is the epitome of every author's dream.
Well, what you said just tied it all up there, because that's what you want to happen. You want to change someone's life or affect it in a positive way. And to hear that I've done that for at least one person, maybe several, is just like made this whole process and all those citations and everything I discussed that was so tumultuous was all worthwhile.
Absolutely. That's so awesome. So guys, remember chat is, well, I mean, I've seen you guys in the chat, and actually I'll call attention to a couple of the things. This popped up a little bit ago, but very good point. I'm trying to remember at what point it popped in at. It was mid conversation. So Sage, if you remember, let me know what part of that was. And I thought this was really good. Interesting. This kind of ties into Writer Punk's latest video where she posed that the key to a good dark fantasy is hope. And, the thing applies not only to dark fantasy, but to all stories, including our own. And, hope is what keeps us going. Like when someone gives up and loses hope, they're done. That's they mentally check out, or they just physically just kind of give themselves up. And I think that's what is so important about a book that is centered on gratitude, because the gratitude that we have also fuels our hope. Hopes that things can improve or get better. And whether it does or not, it still strengthens that. Because it's on that emotional frequency, I would imagine. Hope, joy, love, I would imagine it's on there somewhere.
Yeah, and that's a great point that Sage makes, because the best movies and the best stories we all know are the massive adversities that people overcome, but there's always that glimmer of hope that they keep. They don't ever give up. They keep fighting through, and it's just that little bit that gets them over that tipping point to where they, have this crescendo of, experience or overcoming this massive adversity or something. And that makes the best stories, the best movies, anything you can look back on and say that was the best whatever I read, saw, listened to, always has some, massive overcoming of some, monumental adversity, with that glimmer of hope always in there.
Yeah, very true. And Sage said, I think it was in relation to the citations. Yeah, that does sound very familiar. And to your point, Jennifer, about tracking citations, especially if you're going to be doing nonfiction, making sure that you keep track of everything, you have it in a footer note or just in a separate document where you can keep track of all of it. So I think you're now a published author. You were an author before when I was working with you. You're a published author now. What advice would you give to people who are in the process of writing their books, no matter fiction or nonfiction? What encouragement would you give them, kind of looking back at to where you were, 6-7 months ago?
Say, yeah, where I wish I would have had this type of, I wish I would have written this down on a sticky note, but I would just say, just keep writing. That's, if there's nothing else you can think to do, or you feel like, you're stressed out about like, oh, this isn't coming together. Well, let that go and write something else. It could be a different chapter of the book. If you're writing fiction, it could be the ending that you've kind of had in your mind. Just keep writing, because you can never write too much. It's a lot easier to prune than it is to add to if you don't have enough. So a much better scenario would be you overwrote and you just got to trim up the little pieces. That's so much easier than saying, oh, I need something else here to make this, chapter work. And you have to come up with something. So if you don't know what to do, I would just say, just sit down and just let the words come out, and whatever, if it fits in, great. Maybe if it doesn't, maybe it's another book that'll come down the road. And I've actually done that, because in writing nonfiction, I don't know if anybody's on here who writes nonfiction, but you cannot over research. It's not possible, because there's always more out there that you just haven't come across. And at some point you just have to say enough is enough. And this is what's going to go in my book. And I've got all these other pieces of research that maybe that will go into the, another rendition of my book or my second book or something like that. But it's never a bad idea to just sit down and write.
Yeah, that's great advice, because sometimes we get in our own head too much and we try and overanalyze, and when really we got to keep putting one letter in front of the other to get to the end. And Sage brought up a good point. I think even for fiction, if you're including any kind of technical details, hang on to the research and citations, because you never know when you're going to need it at some point. Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So important, especially like non-historical fiction, that especially. Good grief. So many things. That's a whole another rabbit trail. I think the final question that I have before we kind of wrap up here is, do you have any plans for a second book down the road?
At this point, I've kind of toyed with it, but I'm not ready to start. I've got so much going on with this one right now. I can't even start to think of what would be the next, if there is a next. So there's always the possibility, but as of right now, it's a firm maybe.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there's always a good time to kind of have a little break in between the writing and focusing on just, pushing and moving forward with what you're doing with this book now. And hopefully, as some of the restrictions and things kind of start lifting a little bit more, hopefully you'll be able to get some in-person things, so that way you can do the book tours and book signings and things like that, and have some more time to get that exposure out there for your book.
That would be great. Can't wait for things to open up. I'm sure everybody is in this mindset, but it's like, when will things open? We're all just waiting.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like it's Black Fridays outside of Macy's, where all the stands are going open, just like, come on. Yeah. Sage said, I have a sign on my bookshelf in my office that says one word at a time. And I think that's all I can do is just keep going one word at a time. Absolutely.
That's a great saying. I love it.
Yeah, so good. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining in on the stream and helping support Jennifer in her goal to get this book out to the world. Again, if you want to check out her book, the link is going to be down below in the notes. And I highly recommend that you check it out. I strongly suggest that you buy it, because it's an amazing book. And if it's maybe gift it to somebody that who just needs a little bit extra, needs some positivity in their life, it doesn't hurt. It really does not hurt. Jennifer, any closing comments from you?
I was going to suggest, Stephen, that for your viewers and your listeners, I would be happy to give them a free chapter. And I was thinking the chapter on adversity. If you would like to do that, I can leave a link that you can send out to your viewers and give that to them. Especially in this time, I'd love to just give back something. And if they like it, maybe they can explore my book a little further. Absolutely.
Yes. So I will get that from Jennifer, and then we will get it down in depending on the type of link it is. I will try and get that in the comments section. I'll pin that to the top, so that way you guys have access, and it's easier to find than trying to shuffle through the show notes. It'll be down in the comments, pinned at the very top. So keep an eye out for that, guys. I will be getting that put up as soon as I get the link from Jennifer. And thank you, Jennifer, so much for offering that. I think that's a wonderful way to just help encourage a lot of people, especially right now.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate the time and for having me on.
Yeah. And Sage says, thanks. This has been great, and all the best to you and your journey, Jennifer. And what a wonderful generous offer. So guys, thank you again so much for your support, not only for this channel, but for Jennifer as well. And I will look forward to seeing you guys next time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.